Okay, here we go. Chapter 2, Part 1 of the examination, a quick peek at Lydia, Proteus, Maha, and Joseph. The present, more or less. Lydia felt nervous, as if someone was watching her, beside Lawrence. It was a thunderstormy morning, 11 o'clock, with great dashes of rain pounding against the windows. She was 73, and angrier than usual about it on dark days. Lawrence sat on the blue couch. "Well, what do you say? I do wish you'd quit prowling around and give me some kind of an answer," he said. She frowned and put down her rye and ginger. "My kids will not like it much. Not that that makes any difference. God, they're hitting 50. And Anna in particular, is pretty pompous. But I just might do it, Larry." The aged poetess on her last binge. "I like college-age people, too. They haven't got into the establishment yet, and we're out of it, thank heaven. My kids would be okay. The idea of a tour, of course. But you and me traveling around the country together in a trailer, unmarried, well, you know how conventional they are. But they can hardly call you a dirty old man, since I'm older than you. So to hell with it, I'll go." He was so excited that he almost dropped his pipe. "We'll fill the camper with books and food and liquor. And two of my cats, Tucky and Greenacre, they have to go. And Mr. George and my goldfish." He groaned. The two cats and Mr. George. She wanted to cry, but she wouldn't. Defiance rose up, so that she thrust her head backward in an old gesture that had been startlingly dramatic when she was young. "I'll make out papers before we leave, giving the house to my children. I don't imagine, really, that we'll be coming back." "We will, goddammit, we will." He stood up, but knowing how she was, he didn't put his arms around her. He only said again, "We'll both come back." "Oh, to hell with it. If you say we will, we will. After all, what difference does it make? Forget it. You know, I meant to tell you, not to change the subject, that those dreams of mine are getting nuttier all the time. Last night, none of them made sense. Yet right now, talking to you, it almost seems as if they did. If only I could remember them." Lawrence said, "When you talk like that, then I'm sure that we've known each other before we met, I mean. You are, after all, what? 15 years older than I am? But in some odd manner, it always seems to me that you are younger." "My dear love," she said flippantly, "in the world's eyes, we make one hell of a funny pair. The thing is, no one ever thinks they'll really grow old. It always comes as a surprise, and the world sort of hates you for it. Growing old, gracefully or not, just isn't the polite or tasteful thing to do. And you can't blame the young either, because when we were young, we felt the same way. Too bad. Because in one way, I feel freer than I ever did before." "You look 10 years younger than you are," he said. "Don't be trite. Telling a woman that she looks 63 instead of 73 isn't likely to win her favor. You'd be smarter to say nothing. For some reason that I've never understood, growing old is considered bad enough for a man, but unforgivable crime for a woman. But best, I don't get on that subject." She took another sip of her drink. "It's true, I suppose. In good light, and if I bothered to wear makeup, I could look nearly your age, maybe. But as it is, I look like a scrawny boy grown suddenly old, with white hair and gaunt face, and quite incredulous about how it all happened. As I am, of course. Yet, what I am, I am. I can't see dyeing my hair, for example. In a way, it's pretty damn lucky to be 73 years old and get white to begin with. He was silent. Then he said, "If the doctors are right, and my heart does go suddenly, then I'll follow our plan," she said. "For that matter, I don't know how long I'll hold out. I'm quite aware that the first stages of my condition have already come upon me. My memory should be all right generally, for a while, though. But you can never tell. If not, then you follow our plan. When I can't recite my own poetry right, then I suppose I'll know that something's wrong." And suddenly it seemed really funny, beautifully hilarious to each of them. He said, "Well, beat their hospitals, their rest homes, and final asylums." Exuberance flashed through his thin, nervous frame. She laughed with him, then stopped. "My electric pencil sharpener," she said. "I just remembered. I dreamed of my old 8th grade classroom. Only my electric pencil sharpener was in it, which is ridiculous, of course. They didn't have them then. Now I wonder what that means." "A bleed through from one dream state to another," Oversoul 7 said to Cypress. They were suspended in 2 green leaves that rustled in the wind outside the windows. "You heard what she said about the pencil sharpener? That was the error you missed," Cypress said, and 7 grinned. "Wait," Lydia said. "I was a man in the dream, fairly young. Funny how some of it comes back." Lawrence frowned suddenly. "Never question the dream messages of the gods," he said dramatically. "You might find out what they mean." "Now don't say things like that," she cried. "It makes me nervous. And look out at those leaves outside. How alive they seem. How watchful. God, I wish the damn storm would stop." "The sound of rain on a trailer roof will be different," Lawrence said. She smiled over at him. He'd just closed his leather shop for good. He'd upholstered the whole camper trailer, and half of her books had leather covers that he had made for her. She almost gasped. How could they be so in love and so old? "In my dream, someone was taking an examination," she said. "I was thinking of my books and just remembered." "I was, dear Lydia. We both are." Oversoul 7 was all ready to transmit the words to Lydia when Cypress said gently, "No prompting, remember." The leaves were really tossing in all that wind. Oversoul 7 filled himself with the uniqueness of it, but because Cypress was saying, "All right, we have to leave now." The first part of the examination allows for quick viewing only, and the scene changed. 23rd century A.D. Proteus secretly yearned to be a girl. They were so much freer to express themselves. Instead, he was stuck at home in the living nodule. Excuse me. In the living nodule, father, and only innocuous hobbies to content him. He also yearned for the sight of something naturally green, growing and real. In fact, this desire had grown so strong that he determined to do something about it. He said eagerly, "Surely we could take some small space and devote it to a natural miniature farm. Say, the whole thing only took up one living nodule. It would be self-sufficient. Someone ought to be able to give us permission." Mithias, his father, frowned. "Life grows," he said. "That kind of life grows, anyhow. There's no stopping it. It's wild. We've spent 2 centuries developing an artificial environment that we could handle. If you gave that kind of life freedom, people would have children all the time. You'd be dead at 60 or 70. Our way of life is balanced, but I can't expect you to really understand that at 16. He paused and said with a grunt, "When we had our natural environment, the women were kept busy having children. Men had the positions of power. Otherwise, I can't think of anything good about those days. They were filled with sickness, with wars, social diseases. "You're right as usual," Proteus said. But he was still sick of being cooped up inside with his father all day long. Mithridates was watching his son's face. "Now don't start brooding," he said. "We're due for a rain at noon. Why don't you go outside and watch it? It always lifts your spirits." "I might," Proteus said. He was shy, diffident, but strangely arrogant too. The suggestion sounded too much like an order, so he just stood there. "It's almost noon now," Mithridates said irritably. So Proteus scowled, went through the door of their spacious nodule. He stood on the small plastic sidewalk, looked up at the plastic trees. Down there beneath him, where the real earth was, who knew what was going on? Really, no one, he thought. Except for the scientific expeditions, no one went there anymore. But then he stopped thinking as the rain began. Usually it excited him. Now he felt more depressed. It would rain politely for 15 minutes. The water would run down the plastic drains and be saved and purified, and then fall tomorrow for 15 minutes someplace else. When he was small, he had a schedule of all the rainfalls. He knew exactly where and when it would rain. His own nodule area held 15 subites with over 1 million people, and he'd run over the plastic sidewalks, frantic with excitement, keeping up with the rain. He squinted up. 3 clouds passed. They always did at rain time. If you didn't know that the artificial sky stopped at 1/8 mile of a mile up, or if you tried to forget it, like he used to, then you could imagine that the rain was real and the clouds. They were real enough, he thought, only they were man-made and regulated. He scowled, then grinned. Imagine seeing 4 clouds one day, or even 2. How that would shake everyone up. But the rain fell from the sky of the floating city, and there would never be 1 cloud more or less. He almost wanted to cry, but he didn't, remembering his age. What would a real flood be like, he wondered, or a windstorm? For a minute his eyes closed under the impact of sheer emotional excitement. He'd seen microfilms of ancient natural disasters in which the power of nature was unleashed, and now he imagined great brown curls of floodwater emerging from real rivers, torrents of rain that fell with great force, winds that whipped a world apart. Yet Earth had survived. It was still down there. And down there great climatic changes still existed, heat and cold, as they were, despite their convenience or inconvenience to man. To be pitted against that, Proteus held his breath, almost woozy with the thought of it. To exist in the context of nature. What excitement it must have generated. Just a real rainstorm coming from nowhere, appearing out of itself, out of nature, sinking down into real ground filled with dirt, bugs, and roots. His eyes stung. The polite rain was done. It was all a sham. The plastic trees didn't need nourishment. They didn't grow. Psychologists thought that the Earth-type environment helped man to feel secure. Proteus knew this, but now he stared angrily at the meticulous street and went back inside. Mithridates was waiting for him. "There's no way that you could set up natural life conditions inside a subite, son," he said. "You know that. Don't torment yourself. You'd have to go to Earth." "Well, people do go there," Proteus said. His face flushed. He lowered his eyes. "But they don't live there." "A few do. Microfilms mention them. Historians go down. Scientists, they have to make repairs on their equipment sometime." "So what?" his father said. "There's no future on Earth. The whole place is drained, dry, useless, stripped of anything worthwhile. It's just a husk." He paused and said more gently, And Proteus, you are a boy, not a girl. It's true that your opportunities aren't as extensive as they might be, but there are plenty of places for you to fit into here. Even if there were opportunities on Earth, and there are not, then they'd go to the women. Proteus looked out the window. The sidewalk was already dry. The suction equipment had absorbed all the water so that none was wasted. He turned so that his father couldn't see his face. Everything's the same, all the time, he said that dully. Don't you ever think about how fantastic it must have been, just people with all colors of skin, that alone? Now we're all homogenized. At this, Mithias laughed. What's wrong with everyone having olive skin, he asked. You're just arguing for the sake of it now. There's all kinds of variations if you want to look for them. From yellow olive to brown olive to olive, Proteus said. You just don't understand it all. Centuries ago, there were black men and white men and yellow men, and they all fought with each other, Mithias said wearily. Now there's one less thing to fight about. The races merged. What's so wrong about that? Will you stop trying to pick an argument with me and find something constructive to do? Proteus nodded, but he realized suddenly he was finished arguing. His father wanted him to do something constructive, and he would. Somehow, he would get to Earth. Somehow, he'd recreate an ancient farm there. Instead of dreaming and being frustrated, he would act. Someday, he'd stand on real ground while real rain fell, and then this would seem like the dream. You're going to have trouble with that one, Cyprus said to Oversoul 7. They were conversing in the further reaches of the room's plastic dome. Well, he's not one of my favorites, 7 said. He's so gloomy half the time. Cyprus waited, then she said, there's a connection that you seem to have missed. Shall I point it out to you? No, give me another chance, 7 said. I don't need any more demerits, not even one. He reviewed the entire scene, including the thoughts he'd received telepathically from Proteus. Then he blushed. Of course, the farm. The farm. Proteus wants to set up a farm on Earth. It's just possible that he had a dream last night about a farm or a picture of one. Exactly, Cyprus said. Well, Proteus has had that idea for some time, 7 said. But if he did participate in Joseph's dream, he'd use it in his own way, of course. You know, in a way he acts older than Lydia. He broods so. Cyprus smiled. Do you know why? No. I'm sure you'll discover the reason for yourself. It's not up to me to tell you. But now suppose we look into your Ma'a. Oversoul 7 was delighted to change the subject. Here we are now in 35,000 BC. The wolf cubs sped across the cliffs in the moonlight. Maha crouched in the shadows waiting. She was hungry, but then she usually was, her belly pushed in almost to her backbone. She ran across the cliffs when the wolf cubs vanished and scurried to the clearing where they'd been forced to leave the kill they'd found. She'd frightened the cubs off by throwing rocks. Rampa came over from the other side of the cliff. He'd used bow and arrows. The two of them found little, only a dead hare, but they ate it at once, ravenously. The hides they wore protected them somewhat against the wind, and they crouched, unspeaking, while the ice cracked along the cliffs almost in sequence, and the air rushed in and out of the rock crevices. Cyprus said to Oversoul 7, I didn't know you were that adventurous. Oversoul 7 shrugged with just a hint of smugness. Then he said, Proteus should experience this. If he wants to know what the real Earth is like, he'd probably plead for some artificial pretty rain that stops on time. Cyprus smiled but said nothing. Maha and Rampa finished eating. They ran down into a nearby cave, pulling in and out of the cold, satisfied. The damp smell of the hides rose to their nostrils. Their bellies felt warm from the food. A sense of peace descended upon them. They fell asleep. Their satisfaction was transmitted to Cyprus and 7, who also felt the cold wind that rushed past the cave entrance. I could make the wind die down, just a bit, couldn't I? Seven asked. Cypress nodded. Oh, Seven said. The change in the wind had alerted Maha even in her sleep. In a moment, her spirit body came out of the cave. She saw them. Oh, it's you, old man, she said. She's very good, Seven said to Cypress, but she always sees me as an old man. Why not? You always are an old man when I see you, Maha said. Are you going to help me keep watch tonight? Not tonight, he said, adding to Cypress, I help her watch sometimes when she's tired, so the wolves don't find the cave. You know that you're out of your physical body? Cypress asked. Of course, Maha said scornfully. If I didn't go out in the spirit at night, who would watch over my body while it slept? Only I don't like to get too far away from my body. Rampa hardly ever comes awake when you sleep. Whose spirit are you? I'll tell you sometime, Cypress said. Then she and Seven disappeared. Maha always sees me as an old man, Seven sighed. Come to think of it, she sees me as black because she's black. Joseph sees me in lots of different ways, but he likes to see me as an old man, too. It gives him confidence in me for some silly reason. But Proteus, he never sees me at all. So, Cypress said, well, none of them see me as I am, male and female, ageless, beyond any image. Even Lydia. I mean, she doesn't let herself believe in her soul at all. At least not on an intellectual level. Now who's brooding, Cypress said. You sound as downhearted as Proteus. Proteus. He'll probably never see me if he keeps on the way he's going, Seven said. But you've already met Joseph. So I presume that this part of the examination is over. I'd like to see him when he's awake, in his time, if you don't mind, Cypress said dryly. I'm going to cut it off here now and do another video. Thank you.